recorded. Okay. Well, thank you all for agreeing to be here. I realize this is different time zones we're talking about. We've got somebody in Central European time. We've got somebody in British Standard Time. We've got somebody in Ecuador who's an hour behind us. Justin, myself, and Luke, our wonderful production assistant, are in Eastern Time. So this idea came through kind of discussions I've had with the everybody who is here today about the World Cup and how central the World Cup is to global football, especially being in the United States. There's been a tremendous amount of interest here. So I thought it would be great to have a discussion amongst people I have the utmost respect for and people who have an understanding of the game that far exceeds my own and exceeds most people. So I think this discussion will be really rewarding as to insights into the game, things that are going on that aren't necessarily as apparent and aren't discussed in mainstream media and by some of the pundits who go on and on and on about the sport. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce everybody. So first, my co-host in this event is Isabel Jijon, who's a lecturer in sociology at Harvard University, and maybe more importantly, teaches a class on the sociology of sport. A very well-attended class, right, Isabel? I mean, it hundreds of students. Second, Loran Vrielink is the founder of Tachtalyse, an organization that trains athletes and coaches and people like that. Two of the Dutch stars, Cody Gakpo and Daniel Nalen in particular, but others as well. And then my good friend Suds, Gopaladesikan. I hope I got that close. I worked on it. Who is the technical director at Newcastle United, comes from a very illustrious career prior at Benfica and Atalanta. And where Suds will end up, nobody knows. The possibilities are unlimited. And then my also good friend Justin Morrow, who is a former MLS player, but has more recently been involved in a number of work involving athlete activism and has written a wonderful paper on athletes as activists. So thank you for coming. Okay, I'm going to start. I'm going to turn it over to Isabel right now, and for the first question, and to get the dialogue. And it'll be, since it's a pretty small group, we can just kind of discuss. Thanks, Isabel.
No, thank you so much, Steve, and thanks for setting this up. I'm really excited to learn from all of you experts as well. This has been such an exciting World Cup, and so I can't wait to hear more about what your opinions are, especially as we get near the end. Steve and I were talking about starting with some big themes, and we're going to start big and throw it out to you. What do you think has been the most important story of this World Cup, and which of these stories do you think has received the least attention? If you had to pick one of the many one of the many things we've learned from this World Cup. Does anyone want to start? Justin, do you want to start? I'm just looking at who's
Yeah,
next.
I can start. I can start. Hi, everyone. First, let me say thank you to Stephen for putting this together. Isabel, great to be here in conversation with you, Seth, Lauren. Pretty esteemed panel here, so I'm looking forward to a great conversation. The story that needs to be talked about is just how positive this World Cup has been. I'm American, so I'll start with saying that I'm viewing this tournament through the lens of an American. I'm not living in the United States, but I've been here in the United States throughout the summertime, taking in the tournament. I haven't gone to games, and I've just been around different cities, and it's just been so incredibly positive at a time where our country really needed it. I think the world really needed it. Like humans as a race really needed it. We've had, some really tough news cycles for the past 3, 4, 5, going on 6 years now. So it's really healing to turn on the television and see people from different cultures, different nationalities, representing their teams, cheering on their teams, and the good moments and the bad moments, they're side by side with each other and they're getting on, it hasn't been all rosy, there's been some tough things. The death of the fans, the Mexican fans after the Ecuador being one of them. Kylian Mbappe dealing with racism being another incident. But overall, the tournament has been incredibly positive, and there was so much doubt about this tournament heading into it, right? From the expanded field to human rights and safety and security worries about that, from the weather to travel and just how big this tournament was going to be. There was lots and lots of doubts, and I think it's turned out really, really well. I don't see the writers writing about it as a whole yet. I think that will come once the tournament wraps up and we're able to really digest. Right now, I think we've been writing about these micro moments that have happened throughout the tournament that, we need to talk about as they happen, and that's normal. But overall, I think the tournament has been incredibly positive and a bit healing for our country and people around the world.
Yeah, I'll go after maybe. Justin, that's a fantastic answer. Likewise, I want to first start with saying thank you, Stephen, Isabel, Luke, for setting this up. Super exciting to take a small little break from what is a hectic summer market for every person working at a football club. To be able to talk a little bit more about, why this game is so special, why football is really the global sport. I think for me, because I haven't been able to follow every single game, every single headline, but being from the US, but in the last 8 years, having lived in now 5 years Portugal, 3 years in Italy, coming up 1 year now in the UK, I think the World Cup in general is a sort of catalytic event. It's sort of an event where it's people are just interacting with it, whether they're interacting with the game itself or they're just interacting with content around the game. Um, you don't actually have to be a football fan or a football geek and know all the tactics to feel the buzz of the sport, which is what I think is quite exciting about the World Cup. And speaking a little bit about news cycles and stuff, it always feels like the news doesn't always sort of write about the positive stories that go on. There's probably been, tens of millions of positive micro interactions between people of within the same culture with different cultures. Um, that haven't been written about, and maybe those are sort of stories that come up over time, similar to, I don't know if people remember the Facebook group. I think it's on Instagram now, Humans of New York, just like people going around making stories about, everyday people that have a special story to share. I have the feeling that this World Cup will have, those everyday interactions between two Americans of different races, between, a Japanese person and a person from Netherlands in Texas or whatever. I think that's where they played. And these small little stories, they capture moments of magic, which I think has been the most exciting bit. And hopefully that story gets told in years to come as well. And also sparks more mayhem for Americans to keep on with football, soccer.
Great perspective, Suds, and also for me, great and thankful that I can be in this panel with you guys. Interesting perspective from Justin from located in US, Suds from England. I'm here in Barcelona. Yesterday, it was louder, to be honest, than the day before. So imagine that, how many Argentinians, maybe they are just living in my neighborhood, but it was unbelievable. And it will be an incredible final where we see so many people in Barcelona coming together. And Stefan and I were speaking about it, like the impact that Barcelona had on this World Cup as well, going to the final. It's amazing to see. Talking about the stories, I think I was just realizing today, like how the game of Cape Verde against Argentina was, right? Like we almost forget already how good they did that game, and these stories that are unwritten. I hope we keep remembering these type of stories, because it's amazing to see these small countries for the first time in the World Cup competing to Argentina. What everybody said was the easy road to the final. I don't know. Maybe we can judge on that, but these untold stories versus the Barcelona players, the Barcelona impact, but as well Spain and Argentina with amazing teams that everybody sees anyway.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. I'd like to move to another question. Coaching philosophies. So, I mean, there's an argument that football, soccer, is comprised of different philosophies, of different ways of dealing with, you know, play, of dealing with different ways of dealing with players. There's a whole variety of means to kind of communicate with your team and to to have success on the pitch. So, what philosophies do you think have been present in this World Cup? And Suds, I'm going to start with you on this one.
I'd say loads, but at the same time, they all can boil down into maybe, three or four distinct big families. I'd like to maybe first start with, it's a very polarizing debate. You can probably have a good academic discussion around, do people agree with having 48 teams? Do people not agree with having 48 teams? But I think a positive point towards having 48 teams, or even more, because I think there's conversation about having 64 now, is nowadays with technology, with video, with access to video, with access to websites, with people explaining different tactical ideas, there's sort of a philosophy that transcends sort of, tiki-taka or Brazilian samba or things like that, or street football that comes from France. There's sort of like a universally learned philosophy, which is just from all the content that you can find online. I'm rambling a little bit, but the point I'm trying to make is that you saw Paraguay defend with such resolute defending. They were able to set up in a low block very well and defend for large stretches of time and force Germany to attack and attack and attack over and over to even force them into penalties. You saw Cape Verde also defend in a low block quite well. And I find that quite interesting. I think, 10, 15 years ago, I think these teams would not have had perhaps defensive discipline to be able to defend in a low block like this. Not because that they couldn't, it's just that maybe the coaching material was not available at the time at such a wide scale as it is today to be able to raise the level of every single footballing nation in different phases of the game, in possession, out of possession. But so that's probably been the first coaching philosophy I think is interesting. I'd probably say the second one, which I think needs a little bit of attention, is you had two games that went on. You had Spain versus France, you had England versus Argentina. In one game, Spain versus France, you had a player like Rodri who was covering, I think, around 125 meters a minute. And then you had a second game, England-Argentina, where you had Messi who was covering about 78 meters a minute. Two different positional groups, but they tell you a different story of how one team was really attacking with having one defender, one pivot, playing with possession, but making sure if they lost the ball, they were positioned in a very good way to win the ball back. And then you had a second team which had their star attacker, or one of the greatest of all time in Messi, not doing much work, but the rest of the team could do a lot of work for him. So whether you play possession style, whether you play counter-pressing style, whether you play in a low block, there were a lot of philosophies on display, and I think all these philosophies are now accessible just due to the digital age that we live in, which is quite exciting.
I wonder, is it so? There are a multitude of them, right? So it's not, you're not talking about just three or four. I mean, especially with the diverse countries in the World Cup, and it's not even necessarily just regionally sort of located. It kind of transcends boundaries, and different people pick up different types of techniques and tactics.
Just to say two other quick ones. Morocco, for example, Morocco spent about 13 to 15 million on a major academy that resembles France's Clairefontaine Academy. I think in the US it would be similar to like Florida's IMG. And they had sort of this like one elite center where they were able to educate footballers from a football perspective and also an educational perspective. Then you also had this Norway approach of building 500 or hundreds of artificial pitches around the world, around Norway, so that they could then train all year round as opposed to only training when the sun was out. And I think that also breeds a bit of coaching philosophy as well, too. Just one centralized unit to be able to teach football, or a decentralized way as well. But now I'm getting into now I'm getting into detail.
Okay, thank you. Justin, Lauren, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, definitely the philosophy that Suds is talking about, where we come back from, like the history of football into the history per country. And I think Paraguay, you highlighted already, they accepted their individual and collective decision to, okay, we should play defense. If you look to Cape Verde versus Curacao, many players I know and as well are coming from the Netherlands. If I see them on paper, I would say Curacao is much better on paper than Cape Verde. But as a collectively, Cape Verde has impressed much more. I mean, Curacao started with a 7-1 defeat by Germany, even if it is Germany, but their philosophy was like, hey, let's play and let's go for it. And Paraguay was like, hey, guys, let's defend and we will accept in the transition. We accept our role. So the philosophy of a country versus the acceptance of individual, collective, or the staff, maybe, I think was a big interesting thing to highlight here, because Netherlands, Germany went out early, Morocco, like what is their philosophy of their country, and did they really play that? Netherlands, I don't think we played that. Look to England yesterday. Did they really play the English football? What we know about their players? I don't think so. So we see a lot of countries adapting to the opposite team. One thing that highlighted for me yesterday was after Argentina yesterday was leading in the score, they still were pressing to the goalkeeper. That was for me something that no matter what, we're going to keep pressing to the goalkeeper. That is like the philosophy in their system, that they want to continue doing that. England was going down, Netherlands was going down. So many teams, they were like, okay, we are one on top, but still we are defending too much. Like, but what is your philosophy as a country and where do you hold on? And I feel also we see so many five defenders this season. I think it's the most. I think Suds know this better than me. But there are so many defensive styles with five in the back. And is it better than four? It is not. It is completely not. Like, I think this World Cup has shown that if you go to five in the back, you get goals. You go back. So you went away from your philosophy. You run more back. Players don't know how to play that system, and you will get goals against you. So that is really what I liked about the philosophy of different countries, countries who stick with their philosophy, and countries that they change their philosophy based on their opponents.
I'm just going to follow up in a little bit of a different way with you because I know you work with a lot of youth groups and with younger players. Like coaching philosophy and things like that, how might this World Cup help coaches and young players sort of think about the sport in maybe a more holistic way and a more, there's just not one way to kind of make things work. There are a variety of different ones.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I'd add to the conversation from what Suds and Lauren said was less of a focus on one philosophy in general and just the overall emphasis these days on tactics. Sports science has advanced a lot, and physicality still really matters at this level. Technical ability still really matters. There used to be in the past teams that just had incredible physicality and they could get really far, speed, strength, endurance, just on that alone, they could get really far. Or technical ability, just whatever team had the best technical players could advance really far and even win tournaments. But now the tactical side matters so much. And it's really about the team and how well structured the team is. And you look at some countries like Brazil being one of them, who still has incredible individual players, stars on all of their clubs, physical players who can push a game, but they can't seem to put it together as a team, as a unit. And to your question, Stephen, for kids growing up these days and youth coaches and coaches that are progressing in their careers, I think that's a big point to take away from the tournament, because managing players, everything that goes into being a professional athlete and managing a professional team is still a big part of the equation, but you're seeing tactics really take over. It's been that way for a while, but I think we saw that even more in this tournament.
Kind of building on that, and the question is to the group, is there a tactical trend that you think has defined this World Cup? not about tactics in general, but a specific approach, something that has worked and helped a team advance further than expected, or as we've seen in our discussion of the semifinals, something that may not have worked out. What are your thoughts about what specifically have we learned about tactics in this World Cup?
I think the five in the back definitely did not work out. As you can imagine, I'm also not a fan of it because it creates unclarity for players. And I coach a lot of players, and they all say the same. Like, I have no clue. Do I need to go to the player or not? Like, definitely, if they play with three in the back, center backs, like, do I go out or not? And I think that is definitely it can work, but not like 3 weeks of preparation for a World Cup, in my opinion, when players are not used to playing that way. I think as a head coach of a national team, you should adapt to the qualities of the player. So if just simply check where they are playing, what are the formations in the defense, and adjust to that. So that is one for me that is not successful or not that successful this year. I think it needs to be trained more longer term. And I think what is successful is the overloads in certain areas on the field. We saw France against Spain, where you saw the 3 against 2 on the midfield. People are talking about the magic thing about Spain. It's just a 3 against 2, nothing more, right? Like, we make it sometimes much more than that it is. Everywhere on the field where you play a 3 against 2, you will win on this level the possession. So I think you also need to adjust to the qualities of your players and see where you can create the overload to create the chances. If you have Haaland in the striker position, or you are playing more like Argentina with smaller players, like, you need to adjust to that, to every opponent, but as well to the qualities of your team. And I said it already a bit earlier, I feel that some countries went away from their philosophy rather than staying with their philosophy and going full for that and then maybe go down. But trust that, because your players are tactically as well the more known with that strategy. And that is as well, I coach players, they cannot adjust. We think they can adjust. They are not good enough in that.
I'll take a crack at it. Yeah, I think the trend is a response to and I'll connect it to what you were talking about, Lauren. I think the trend is a response to something that should always be talked about any single time someone gets a public forum to talk about it. Players just play way too many games every season now, and the number of high intensity sprints that players have to do now in the domestic season is increasing compared to 5 years ago. And that leaves, international tournaments in the summertime. It's kind of like, what tactics minimize the amount of physical work that you have to do. I don't know if many people know the movie Goal, which actually is about a fictional character that plays for Newcastle United at some point. Good movie, good trilogy. But there's a scene in the movie where the coach punts the ball and tells Santiago Munoz, I think that's his name, to try to reach the ball before the ball hits the ground. And he can't do it after 3, 4, 5 attempts. And the moral of the story was, the ball moves faster than the player. And, that's been sort of the tactical trend that PSG did in the Champions League final. That's the tactical trend that Spain has been doing. I remember watching the World Cup with I can't remember who, Spain versus Belgium, with a friend of mine who's the chief scientist of Liverpool. And he was just like, yeah, I think in these hot and humid conditions, nobody really wants to chase and win the ball back when Spain has possession, because they'll just play triangles, 4 people games, 2 people games to be able to pass the ball around them. You're chasing in the heat, and Spain is just taking away your legs. There's been other coaches that have talked about the importance of set pieces as a way to also reduce physical load, and then also obviously sitting in a low block and trying to counterattack. So I think outside of tactical trends, I think there's a underlying conversation happening all around the world around players are playing way too many games, first off. But second off, because the calendar is the way that it is, what are different tactics that different teams can apply to maybe save some legs? And going to Lauren's points, it's the teams that sort of didn't stick to one plan, that tried to shift, and that they sort of lost clarity in terms of what they were trying to do, and maybe that's where some teams just faltered.
Suds, just a question, do you really think that staff or head coaches change their playing style based on their physical status of the player outside Messi?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. But I do think that knowing some players in this World Cup, like it is a very, it's a clear thing that a lot of people came into this World Cup tired. And also another thing about tactics is that different to club football, you don't get many days before games to drill concepts in. You don't get time to really work on patterns of play. How are you going to build up? With five defenders versus how you might build up with four defenders. How do you build up with the keeper? How do you build up with your, center midfielder dropping in between the center backs? What's the width of your fullbacks looking like? What's the role of your forward to give width, like to give team length? There's so many different factors that get trained on in the training week that you just don't get in national team football. And national team football, I think, is going back to Loran and Justin's point of, drilling in clear concepts, drilling in a clear philosophy, and then also sort of coaching belief into the team as well, which is something that Justin was talking about.
My only 2 cents to add is that I was happy to see crosses come back into the game, you know? It feels like for many years it's been about penetrating down the middle of the field, balls on the ground towards the goal, runners running behind, combination play through the midfield. And you see Argentina score on some beautiful crosses and really big moments. It's a facet. I was an outside back. I was attacking outside back. We like to cross the ball. So for me to see that go out of the game for such a long period hurt my heart. So to see some of these big moments end up on goals after crosses, really put a smile on my face.
Okay, thank you. Okay, in your opinions, which player has stood out most in the World Cup? And I'll start with anybody who wants to start with that question. It's a big one.
Say the
So
question again.
the question is, which player has stood out the most in the World Cup? You could say player or players because that's almost unfair to
I'll
pick one.
Do we really need to talk about this? Or is it that obviously?
I'll start because I have a different answer than probably you two. I'm the sport for good guy. I've told Lauren and Suds this. Stephen knows this well about me, but I told them about this about me that I've used sport for good, used the platform of sport to heal social issues in the world throughout my playing career and now in my post-playing career. So for me, a big story in the tournament around a player is Julian Quinones, the player from Mexico, who was Mexico's best player throughout the tournament, scored the most goals, but obviously he's black. He's Colombian born. And he played in Mexico for a number of years and faced racism at times. And in this World Cup, he's been the best player for Mexico, and he's been adored. And for me, it's a big storyline. We talk about it all the time in football. Immigrant families, players moving around different countries, and the meaning of belonging. What does it mean to be from one country? And to see him be embraced in Mexico as the only black player on the team and the best player, and someone who just really stood out to me on the field when I watched him in the game. He was the protagonist in the game for Mexico. He was always pushing. He was aggressive in all of his movements. He was lively running in behind. He won the ball to his feet as well. That was a special story for me. So I really enjoyed that one.
Justin, can you follow up because you and I have discussed this, and that is that sort of coaches come together and they don't necessarily sort of think about, the different cultures that some of the players come from. So, how that aspect of team building is every bit as important as some of the tactics or some of the training that goes on.
Yeah, I mean, we see this more on club teams, and it's getting there on our national teams as well. But players just being from all over the globe, bringing in their different cultures, bringing in their different backgrounds into one locker room. How do they mold together? How do they get on the same page? I mean, what generally we'd say is, oh, we don't see race or we don't see differences. You're in the locker room, you're the same as me, but that's not the case. there are differences, and it's only when we talk about those differences, it's only when we bring that to the surface that we can truly, be one. Um, so for me, having these different storylines, whether it's Balogun being as prominent as he was in the United States men's national team and being really accepted within the fan base, Lamine Yamal, um, and his background, his Moroccan background, is a big talking point in Spain, and then having the fans coalesce around that. All of this stuff really matters, and it's a complicated thing that doesn't get talked about enough.
Suds, Loran, anybody else want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you expect who I'm gonna say, but I'm not gonna tell him or say him because everybody talks about him. I want to get a different player, Cubarsi, the right center back of Spain. He's just 19 years old, and even though we see like Rodri in front of him and Spain amazing, blah blah blah, if you look on tactical decision making, he's genius. He's just 19 years old and nobody talks about it. And I used to work with Stefan de Vrij. And what I learned from him is like the less people talk about it as a center defender, you did an amazing job. Like how many people are really writing and talking about this guy? Like it's Messi, it's Rodri, it's like all the amazing players, but who talks about this right center back? And he had a great season last season, obviously, and for me he does a great World Cup. Undervalued in the Spanish national team, in my opinion.
I'll also go with a youth choice, two youth choices maybe. First one, Gilberto Mora from Mexico. To be 17 years old, to play in the Azteca against England in a knockout round, and to, be comfortable on the ball, to ask for the ball, that kind of bravery being on display for a 17-year-old. I think it's just so important to always keep showing the message that anything is possible. You can do anything that you put your mind to, that you put your belief to, and I think Gilberto Morrow really sees that opportunity. Gilberto, I apologize if I'm pronouncing it wrong. And the second one is Bouyadi, the midfielder of Monaco, and I have a special interest in him because there's a story that came out in the paper that said something about like when he was 16, he was studying for his maths degree. He was playing in Lille, and I have a math degree as well. Um, and I think that's such an interesting thing to go back to Justin's point about the locker room. In a locker room or in a team environment, whether it's a locker room of athletes or whether it's even sort of the bigger team itself, which includes the coaching staff, the analysts, the nutritionists, the sports scientists, the physios, everyone that works at a federation level or club level, they have different interests. They have, they can speak different languages. They have different educational backgrounds. Um, they're in different stages of their life, depending on age and depending on for Buyadi to go out and say, yeah, I was studying math and that's something that I was interested in. I think it also speaks to, the bravery of maybe saying that you have a different interest to what, someone might stereotypically think are the interests of a footballer. Um, and also maybe also add another bit, which is the supplementary work that these players are doing nowadays, whether it's math, whether it's learning how to cook, whether it's learning how to, I don't know, play music. It's all these different things are creating neuroplasticity in footballers' brains to be able to read the game, and maybe that expresses itself on the pitch.
That kind of is a perfect segue to our next question, which is we have so much information now about player statistics, but has there been a moment or even a game where a player has had success based on some intangible that wouldn't show up in statistics that we usually ascribe to football players? Is there anything that comes to anyone's mind?
For me, it's the penalty kicks. I, I think you've seen some of the best players with the best technical ability miss penalty kicks in this World Cup. For me, stepping up, being confident, having the emotional fortitude to know where you want to put it and just take that moment on your shoulders is an intangible that really doesn't get enough credit, enough accountability for it. And then the teams that are able to make these big comebacks and not be rattled, I mean, saw England do it in the Aztec against Mexico. That was just a big moment where they were able to overcome adversity, and so that was really cool to see. Argentina's done it a couple of times already as well. So for me, those moments really emphasize the intangibles in the game.
Yeah, we when I was working at Atalanta, we played Bayer Leverkusen in the final of the Europa League. And at that point in time, playing Bayer Leverkusen, Xabi Alonso was coach, and he had been undefeated all season up until this final. And, I remember the week leading up to that final and just like preparation and just scouring the internet for every single thing that I could find. And there was some few things that I thought was really interesting was multiple players in that team, plus the coaching staff, they kept talking about just the belief until the final whistle. They really believed because during that season there was this, media cycle about how they always score so many goals in extra time. And they were just saying that we really believe that we're going to score a goal in extra time, whether it's a game winner, whether it's to tie the game. And I think there's something there. Like, maybe you can measure it, maybe you can't measure it, but this collective belief that you will achieve a result, like you will achieve a result versus the opponent that you're playing, which might be seeing, the 90th minute clock hitting and stoppage time starting to be like, okay, time to wind down, concentration levels dipping. Yeah, I don't know if that's something that you can really ever measure, but collective belief has been something that's just, I don't know, interesting to watch, and you see it on display this World Cup too.
I think the measurement of statistics, you definitely need to go to Suds and not to me. One thing that I want to highlight is the behavior of players and the behavior of the goals. I analyzed in the airplane, I analyzed all the goals that have been scored until a week ago, and I just analyzed all the goals. I don't work with that much numbers. I work with numbers, but mainly with behaviors. And one goal that came out for me is like the rebound. If you look to many goals, there were rebound goals. I used to be a basketball player, and the rebound is like most important thing in basketball. Like someone shoots and you run to the basket, right? Like to get the second ball. But if you look in football, if you just rewind I think it were 7 out of my head, really simple rebound that one guy goes to the goal and really have like a simple tap in goal. It's definitely a simple concept that in my opinion, every player should have in his backpack. Like, oh, if there's a shot, I need to rebound. It's so simple for a basketball player and so unknown for the football world. So if I look to data, rebounding, definitely, I hope there will be one day a statistic of that sort. I put now my effort or my trust in you to create that expected rebound goal shot or whatever. Good luck with that. But I think that's an underrated skill of an attacking player that definitely should be highlighted in expected goal rate, for example, or expected assist can also be assist.
Okay. I think now we have to move to the final. Okay, we're going to put you on the spot a little bit here. Who do you want to win the final? Who do you think is going to win? Well, maybe you don't have to answer that question, but who do you think is going to win the final and why?
If I want to sleep, I hope Spain is going to win, because otherwise I live close to Arc de Triomphe. It will be full with Argentinians. So in that way, I will choose Spain. And to be honest, I also think Spain will win the World Cup.
But why?
The stability in the squad. For me, they're a bit more stable in their possession than the Argentinians. They're too much depending on one player. Even though we cannot stop them, I still feel that the average level of the players and the team is bigger or better than the Argentinian squad, even though maybe there are some exceptions. But in general, I think the team will win this World Cup. On a tactical perspective, also, I hope that we are not depending on one player who decide the game. Obviously, it's amazing and it will be massive. But still, for the game itself, teams like Paraguay, like Japan, like all these type of teams, they can see that as a collective. you can really come farther in the future, and the tactics will help with that as well. And we are not depending on one star in a squad. I also believe that the future of football will be more or less depending on an individual star and more going to a collective. What we see more in France, for example, you see so many incredible players. They need to lift the team effort a bit there, or England as well, because then I think they will also beat the other teams.
For me, because of familial allegiances, I have to say Argentina is going to win this game. My wife is Argentinian. Her family caught wind of me on a recorded YouTube session saying anybody other than Argentina is going to win the World Cup. I'd be in trouble. I'd be out of the family. So for me, Argentina, it's also hard to pick against Messi, seeing what he's done over his whole career and over this tournament. We've received so many special moments from him throughout his career. We're forgetting how special they are, and this is certainly the last go around for him at a World Cup. So it would be cool and fitting to see him end his World Cup career with another championship. The one reason why I would like to see Spain win is because I think, and someone can check me on this, I think it would be the first time that one country holds both the men's and women's World Cup champions at the same time. I think that would be a really cool story. But for me, it's hard to pick against Argentina and Messi.
I'll give a diplomatic answer as well. I think I'm a huge tennis fan, and I think I grew up. Not I think I grew up a Roger Federer fan, but now seeing I also did like the tenacity of Nadal, um, but now seeing sort of Djokovic's longevity, making semifinals of Grand Slam still. I just think having that one singular person who is just so inspiring that just defies the laws of physics, the laws of the human body, the laws of just anything all the time consistently. That is very inspiring. And I think that is a source of inspiration for many people around the world. So that is why, maybe Argentina winning would be good. I personally probably lean towards Spain. And I think it's to what Justin just said. Um, I don't know what the exact statistic is, but it could be that they hold the Women's World Cup. I know that, in European competitions this year, Conference League, um, Women's Champions League, Europa League, and Champions League, there was more than 75% of coaches were Spanish coaches, and Spain and Portugal and countries like this, Netherlands, I think back in the day, they produce a lot of football theory. And when you are a young kid, I worked 5 years in Benfica, constantly rated one of the best academies in the world. Um, they teach you the theory of the game, but they also teach you to really enjoy the game and and play with a smile on your face and really like have fun. And I think that those two things combined are really powerful in a society and in an industry where you start to see Brazil produce more players for European football, but some of their players are leaving younger from academies into England and other countries in Europe quicker, and they're optimizing for the physical and athletic readiness so that the clubs can make profits on selling these players. You're almost losing sight of a little bit the sight reading and the ability to read the game of football, the ability to understand the game of football, and going back to the concept of like you don't just get many days in between games in international football. It generally is the teams that are able to read the game without necessarily needing a coach or read the game, and that's what Messi does. That's what Messi does really well, or Paredes does really well in Argentina. But to Lauren's point, I think Spain, all 11 players on the pitch just have a really high level of football understanding and game reading capacity. So regardless of how the game goes, regardless of how chaotic it gets, they can fall back to certain principles. And I think that's just such an important thing to remember, especially with where the game is going in terms of more high intensity, more sprints, just more physical output. Players are getting taller as well. It's harder to be a highly technical player that's I don't know what that is in feet and inches anymore, but like 100 and 170 meters, like 170 centimeters. It's really hard to break through in the professional game these days.
Yeah.
And so I just, just a reminder that like the how to play the game and how to read the game and enjoy playing is there on display.
Great, thank you. Well, I think Isabel, should we open it up to the audience? I know we don't have a huge audience here today, but this is a great opportunity for people to ask questions directly without having to wait. So is there anybody with us who would like to ask a question? These are incredibly informed individuals.
I I have a question, Steve.
Yes, Toby.
Yeah, do we, and this is maybe directed at Justin, having played in the MLS, do we see our first Balloon d'Or winner coming from the MLS because of what's happened at this World Cup? Do we think that enough's been done?
Gosh, Sylvia, I would love that. I'm an MLS guy through and through. I think it's just a matter of time. I could answer yes to that question, but I think it would be 15 years from now. I think that whenever I talk about Major League Soccer as a producer of talent, um, as a league and what level it's at, I always talk about it in that time frame. It still needs time to arrive. It's been growing. I was there from 2010 to 2021, and the amount that the league grew in the time that I was there was incredible in all areas, and the ability of the players, the level of the players, the professionalism of the league, the stadiums that have been built, just the machine around it. Don Garber was on the stage today, um, at a sports conference here in New York City, and he was talking about the valuations of MLS teams being, some of the highest in the world. And the professionalization of it is so good, but we need a lot more levels to get to, in terms of the football side. And so I think we'll get there because our market, has everything that you need for that. But I still think it's 10, 15, 20 years away.
I just want to quickly say to what you're saying, almost every club in the Premier League is talking about having full-time scouts in the US now. So there is starting to be a shift in terms of wanting to understand who the talent is coming through, even as young as 14 years old, 15 years old now. So I think the attention will definitely be placed in the US, and that's just what I'm seeing from talking to clubs in the Premier League.
I'm going to put this to Lauren, a question that's a little bit of a follow-up on that. Lauren, have you heard from any of your players coming back or from other players and things like that about, just the types of facilities that exist in the US and it's a different football landscape here as to how they reacted to that?
Only for the facilities, they will sign already contracts in USA related to, for example, Italy, where many training fields, training camps are outdated. Of course, the top 10 not, but if you look to the second division in Spain, second division in Italy, they will sign straight away. Don't worry about the facilities. Like US facilities is, I've been there 12 years ago. It's massive. Like it doesn't matter. There's nothing too big there. Like they have the facilities that the women game is changing. So also you see more women, European women going to US. I'm very curious what the impact of the World Cup will have on US soccer. It is growing the last 10 years in numbers. I saw a year ago, I saw the numbers and it was massive, increasing. But I think the World Cup will help a lot. So I think that was already because of the World Cup that soccer will be much more, getting more attention there. So I'm curious in what Justin says as well. And like, let's see in 10, 15 years where US is standing with the US soccer. And also, if you look to the national team, they have, I think, a quite good squad standing related to, what is it, 10 years ago? 12.
I think the number of people who watched the US Belgian game was over 30 million people. So, which is a very, very high number,
Yeah.
in comparison to audiences in the past. So I think that's an indication of where things are headed. So anybody else, any other questions? Nobody else. Well, maybe I will have a wrap up. Isabel, do you want to start any final thoughts? And then we'll.
Steve, actually, I just
Oh,
unmuted
Don, go
myself.
ahead,
This is Don
please.
Bass. Thank you, everyone, for a really fascinating discussion. I've been learning a lot about soccer from Steve and from Luke, and this is just a wonderful discussion to cap things off. I was really struck by Lauren's point about some teams playing their philosophy regardless of what the opponent is doing, and other teams doing the adjusting. And I wondered, this is a very naive thought, but I would like to get your reaction. In some sense, did Argentina getting that first, I'm sorry, in some sense, did England getting that first goal permit, in some sense, Argentina to play the way its philosophy really is part of that team? And in some sense, did it induce or force England to play against its own philosophy? That's one set of thoughts. And then I just wanted to build on Lauren's point and ask how that perspective, not what I just said, but just Lauren's perspective, how might you anticipate it to play out in the World Cup final?
I would say firsthand that already the first half England was playing a bit the same as the second half. You could predict the first half what was going on. It didn't matter who was going to score. Only if Argentina would have scored, then England was going to press. But that's in many games in the World Cup. It's like waiting until someone scores and then the other one goes over it. We have seen many games in that way.
Yes.
Yeah, to the final, I think they should really believe in their vision and continue with that. That's, in my opinion, still Spain is a better team and a collective and reading the game better. I still definitely believe Argentina has a game, but yeah, for me, it really all depends on the intelligence of the player, understanding what you need to do. And England was lost. France
Yes.
was lost. Like the last, for me, I sent directly to my colleagues, like, there's no plan B. There's no plan B in England. There's no plan B at France. Like, you saw Mbappe pressing alone. You saw Kane doing whatever. They, like, it's never, in my opinion, it's never the mistake of the players. Because if there's no clear plan, I think Mbappe said also something about in the media about it. I mean, we can say something about the numbers. 14 coaches are not all sacked, but the contracts are not renewed, or about 48 teams.
Yeah,
So
do you
for
want
me,
to
it
add
says,
it? Oh, sorry.
for me, it says a lot about, like, also the modern head coaches. They need to adjust to the philosophy of the team, need to understand as well, what do my players need? Like Argentina, I don't think there's a real tactic, to be honest. Like, they play in a block and they have Messi, and they're like, the substitute came in, Messi lost the right side and he put it to the second post. Like, he has done that the whole tournament, right? Like, we know that already, but like, he chooses moments. But I don't really feel there's a clear tactic. Yes, defensive, but like, I don't know, like Spain, 100%. You see these guys really moving and like, oh yeah, I need to create a 3 against 2 here. If you look to England and France, it's more running play, completely different. I love that style. Let that be clear. Like, it's not for me, it should be Spain. No, I love that style. But they need to adjust to like what is happening and what is our vision, and we need to have a really clear plan. And if we get a goal against, what are we gonna do? And I think the head coach have big influence on that, and the players need to trust that philosophy. And I can tell you, I know some players in the World Cup, they do not always trust the head coach. Which
Interesting.
country? I don't know, but that's what I know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Suds, Justin, you want to follow up on that at all?
Um, I know I always have a tennis analogy for everything because I'm addicted to trying to find as many bridges between tennis and soccer, football. Um, Regardless of tactical changes or substitutions or the points that Loran was making in terms of what was England's plan for the day and stuff like that. You know, Novak speaks about this quite a bit. Not just Novak, but other Grand Slam champions speak about this quite a bit. Is give the opponent something to lose. So when England went up 1-0, they finally had a semi-final to lose. They had their spot in the final to lose, and they just like Argentina's been in the final before. They've won the World Cup before. That they're comfortable with the altitude of the moment, and there must have been so many different stories going on at that point. Like Tuchel must have been like, "Wow, if I take England to the final, that's going to be huge. I'll be very, very, very well regarded. I already have Champions League wins, et cetera, et cetera." And then he might have made some defensive substitutions. Um, but the players also did the moment get to them a little bit because they went up 1-0 and they're like, "Oh." And Argentina smelt that. I remember a quote saying we could see them move back, the whole defensive line moved back, meters, and they sat deeper, and Argentina saw that, and England definitely said, now I have something to lose. And I remember very clear, I can't remember what year, but it was French Open final. Stefanos Tsitsipas versus Djokovic. Stefanos goes up 2-0, and you're like, wow, this guy, the clear talent. Is it going to be the first time he's ever going to win a Grand Slam? Djokovic is getting older. I think he'll be the first Greek male to win a Grand Slam, and the moment just got to him, and he lost that final 3-2. So one huge strategy by just mental monsters and people who have been in those environments and altitudes is, give the other team something to lose, and they will start to buckle. And that's when you start to see some shifts in pressing and how they sit in the block and how they try to attack. Um, yeah.
One
Thank
thing
you.
to add on that, it is more difficult to play against three lines than against two or one line. And that is what it's creating. By pushing back, you get two lines or sometimes even one line. It is much easier to play it behind or for shots. People forget that. Three lines, four lines is more difficult to play against.
Justin, any thoughts as the player? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Lauren's point about Argentina and their tactics was pretty astute. They do what's needed in the game to win. They have, a way that they want to play, but they are able to adjust and just do whatever is needed in the moment to win. And I think the best teams have that. I think Spain does that as well. In the game, the opponent is always giving you a problem. They're always showing you a picture, and it's on the team to find the solution. You might go into the game thinking you have one solution and that's your identity. But at the end of the day, you have to respond to what's in front of you. And I think the teams that do that the best are the ones that make it the farthest. And I think Spain and Argentina do that really well.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? Isabel, do you want to wrap up any thoughts you have?
Absolutely. This has been so fascinating. I'm so excited. I was already very excited for the final, but more so now with all of this extra knowledge going in and seeing what's going to happen. I think I just wanted to ask one last question to the group, kind of putting back my sociologist hat, which is, do you think that in this World Cup in particular, that the World Cup has in some ways transcended football? Justin kind of pointed to the positivity around it at the start of our conversation, and I just wanted to bring it back to that and see what other people thought about what beyond football has been important about this World Cup.
I can go since I started on this note. I think it's just another reminder about how powerful this sport really is. And for Americans, Toby, to your questions, for Americans, it's been really special to see everyone with their eyeballs on the television, with people in the stadiums going to the game, and a real focus on the sport. And it's not always like that in this country. So for me, it has been a transcendent moment.
For me, it is the discussion about, hey, every year, every 4 years, we get more team into the World Cup. Is it a financial reason? Is it a political reason? Is it social? Do we really want that more teams are able to compete in the World Cup? Maybe the solution is to have a pre-World Cup. Then how many countries do we have? 109 or something. Like they all can compete in it and get a stage. Something like that. Such you need to check the numbers for me always. But I think, I liked to see like Paraguay, Cape Verde, all these type of random teams that you would not have expected 20 years ago in the World Cup. I think it bonds more the cultures, the internationality. The world is becoming smaller because of that, and humanity. I like that in that way a lot. and think positively in that rather than the finance.
Yeah, I always talk about tactics and nerding out and stuff like that, but I think one thing that the US did really well and speaking to people overseas is maybe not the hydration breaks, but the showmanship of it all. The US stadiums were just so well designed to host such a global, like the biggest um sporting event in the world. And showmanship plays a huge part. I think there's a lot of people who might not ever watch another football game after the World Cup, but they definitely have an appreciation for the sport more. And I think that also matters as well. So the showmanship and how things have been dressed up, and I think the US did really well there.
Well, that is great. Well, I guess if there are no other questions, I would just like to thank everybody so much. I mean, this has been kind of a remarkable event, and it'll be on YouTube. So everybody who attended today, if you could please, I'll send out a link. So send it on to people. These are three remarkable individuals, and of course, Isabel, thank you so much. The Sociology of Sport, which receives large numbers of students. I mean, the sort of value we place on sport, especially on world football, is tremendous. So. I'm going to wrap up. Again, thank you to our European friends who it's very late. To the rest of us, it's time for dinner. For others, it's the middle of the afternoon. So I guess that's a way we think about the sport too, two different time zones. So thanks again, and we'll be in touch with everybody soon. Thank you.